stripping dual nationals of French citizenship. There is growing controversy in France over a proposed citizenship law. People convicted of terrorism charges who are dual passport holders would lose their French citizenship. But isn't that a departure from French values? And what would the fallout be on French society? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Richelle Carey. 2016 is off to a tense start in France. On the first day of the year, a man drove a car into soldiers guarding a mosque in Valence. New Year's Eve celebrations were muted by a security clampdown in Paris. And the French island of Corsica has been hit by weeks of violent anti-Arab protests. France is on high alert following the Paris attacks, which killed 130 people on November the 13th. 3 days later, President Francois Hollande proposed a citizenship law aimed at deterring similar attacks. The law is controversial. Human rights groups say it implicitly targets French Muslims. The politicians backing the amendment, they don't think so. They see it as a necessary measure that will put a country on edge at ease.
It is a highly symbolic measure. As I have said before, this is a strong punishment that the nation is legitimately entitled to oppose upon someone who commits the ultimate betrayal.
So the law penalizes dual nationals who have been convicted of terrorist crimes by stripping them of their French passports. They include any of the 3 million French-born citizens who are a national of another country. They would be charged and sentenced in France and then expelled after completing their sentences. Recent opinion polls suggest that 9 out of 10 French people support this proposed amendment. Let us now get the thoughts of our guests who all join us from Paris. Julien Theron, political scientist and analyst at the University of Versailles. Anne-Elisabeth Moutet, political commentator and journalist. And Yasser, Louati, spokesperson for the Collective Against Islamophobia in France. And welcome to all of you. So, Anne-Elisabeth, tell us your thoughts on this proposed law.
I think this law was, first of all, it's not yet written as law. It's not been even sort of phrased to go in front of Parliament. It will take time. But I think basically it was announced by the President of the Republic because he wanted to have the positive effect on his polls to carry over in the new year. After the attacks in November, he was seen as, for the first time, decisive and handling the situation correctly. He had abysmal poll ratings and they went up, and I think this is a very political measure. And it is because it's popular. This is something that he's going to push through, even though the left wing of his party is against it.
Julien, I want your opinion on that as well. Do you agree that this is largely about politics?
Well, the political power agreed that it was a mere symbolic law and that it might not have that many effect on the fight against terrorism in France. And that's actually what was criticized, meaning that to divide the citizens between the ones who have a double nationality and the ones who do not. And French republicanism is very important, and it implies that all citizens are equal in front of the law. That's a major point. The president today said that he might actually think again about the very particular details, and saying, for instance, that it might touch not only the binationals, but all the French, or another purpose which was proposed by another socialist, the mayor of Paris, called national indignity, meaning that they would not retract the nationality, but only the civil law and the possibility to work in the civil for the state. So we see that the president opened the debate because it was very criticized by the French elites.
So it seems that it's very clear that the party is not on the same page about this.
yes, the party is very divided indeed. And what we see is that the president tried to get the attention of the people itself, because you said it, 9 on 10 person is actually favoring this law, when the elites, what does mean the elite? The elite is the politicians, it's the constitutionalists, it's the political scientists, and a lot of criticism arised from them. So we see that there's a kind of sociological split, and inside the party as well, because the French left is very much loving French republicanism. It's very important for the party's ideology, indeed.
Yasser, what concerns you about this discussion surrounding the possibility of a law like this being passed? What concerns you?
What concerns us all is that the president himself is using the victims as fuel for his idea or for his re-election. First, just 5 years ago, Francois Hollande himself, his Prime Minister Manuel Valls, and even Ségolène Royal, the 3 people who are actually pushing for this measure, were vehemently against this measure. And now talking about this political coup, it is in fact just politics. Alain Juppé himself, now the rising figure to take over the right during the upcoming presidential election, called it a coup, a political coup by Francois Hollande. And let's now talk about this so-called public opinion. First, you don't rule a country with polls, you rule a country with ambition and dignity, to say the least. And just a few days ago, a poll showed up that 74% of the French people did not want Francois Hollande to seek a second term. Why wouldn't he listen to them? So he listens to the polls when it goes, his way, but not the other way around. And talking about the effectiveness of this measure, every single observer, going from legal analysts to even anti-terror judges, say it is completely ineffective. It will not keep a terrorist from carrying out an attack in France.
Yasser, you said a mouthful, so let's go down the list that you said. First of all, because Francois Hollande has flip-flopped on this, do you feel that this is a betrayal of some sort?
Yes, definitely. Francois Hollande is not doing what's best for the country. He's doing what's best for his upcoming re-election. That's all he cares about. If not, how come he's contradicting himself, as 5 years ago he was vehemently against it? And another thing is that a poll came out a few days ago saying that 74% of the French people did not want Francois Hollande to seek a second term and were asking for a renewal of our political class. And now if we want to go further and listen to all the observers, going from legal analysts to anti-terror experts, they all say this measure is completely counterproductive. And to quote, for example, a famous anti-terror judge, Mr. Mark Trevedich, he said, if we have homegrown terrorists, we can't ship them out. If it's a French problem, it should remain a French problem. And he goes even further than that, saying that what kind of country would accept for a terrorist born and raised in France to be sent back to it? Nobody will agree on that.
Anne-Elisabeth, I would like your thoughts on that, on the critics who have said that this type of legislation, which has been discussed in other countries, actually just isn't an effective way of policing this type of issue. What are your thoughts on that?
There are many things that are sort of going to be brought to bear in the fight against terrorism in France, and this is not one single measure that's supposed to solve everything. I suspect this is part of a mix. Part of it is to be seen as doing something very symbolic, and part of it is efficiency. So you've got a very good investigative magistrate, you've got security forces, you've got something that I think is more worrisome, which is the emergency situation that means that the police have rights to investigate, to go into people's homes, etc. You've got a whole array of measures that have been very publicly brought into action with the object not only to fight terrorism, but to be seen to be fighting terrorism. So I think just sort of singling one of the mix of measures and say this is not efficient, yes, I can see that, but that's not really the point. The other thing about this measure is that the new talk right now within the Socialist Party, who do realize that even though they do not agree with their leader, with the President of the Republic right now, at the end of the day, if they're not together, they're going to lose every possible election until the presidential election, and they'll also lose that one. And so what they're trying to find a new way. It has been brought up by Olivier some minutes ago, which is to say you can actually strip their nationality from anybody in France, citizens, even those who only have one passport, and binationals. I'm not sure how this is possible because there is an international law that says you cannot
make someone stateless.
People. So I foresee a great deal of sort of legal discussion and study before this can even go to a vote in Parliament. But the idea is to say we are going to point out the traitors among us, we're going to be seen that we don't have track with them. I think it's very political. As for efficiency, to some extent, because French society has been ahead of its politicians in its reaction against terrorism, because when people believed that what should be addressed was fear, and people took it much further and said, no, we stand for a number of things in France, and we stand for a number of values. I think this is a rare example of politicians running after public opinion instead of the opposite.
And what are those values?
Oh, the values are we are a secular country. We are a republic. We are a country in which we have freedom of speech. We are a country in which we believe in equality for men and women. We are a country in which we believe of the right to offence, the right to blaspheme, because this is something that has existed in this country for 270 years, and it was very hard won in the Enlightenment. The reaction of the French people after the killings of November was something quite extraordinary in that suddenly Paris was seized by a kind of blitz spirit. The day after the killings, people went out to cafes and said, we're going out because we're not going to be terrorized. The reaction of the people who felt that the most mixed and integrated neighborhood in Paris, young, vibrant, multicultural, was the one that was hit, was something to say, this is who we are going to resist. And that kind of sincerity and strength in the people is something that really is motivating the politicians who are sort of seeking, and they're not quite sure what they're seeking. They're not, they are in some way, they're fumbling behind public opinion on this one.
Okay, having said that there was that type of reaction, Julien, are you surprised that there's so much support for this type of proposed law?
Okay, I think that the support 9 on 10 that we are speaking about is actually a support of people wanting to do something against the people who want to attack the state. I think that it's how we have to read it, and not especially to back the separation between the citizens, between the binationals and the others. I'm pretty convinced of that. Regarding to the efficiency of such a measure, or even effectiveness, well, I think that we have to understand what are the stand of modern jihadis, and what they want is actually to separate themselves precisely. They reject the state already before the actions. They reject the state because they feel rejected by the state and the society. So they reject the state, including the nationality. So meaning that it won't have any effect regarding to their own ideology, and when they leave the country, they actually want to be completely out of the state system. So I don't think that retracting a nationality will have any effect. It might be a kind of symbolic measure if it does not divide the citizens, but it's not efficient regarding to anti-terrorism. And we are speaking about several hundreds and probably 7,000 people in Syria now, in Syria and Iraq, in ISIS territory, meaning that if they don't have another nationality, for instance, we have to find a solution, a way to fight terrorism, which is not this one, because if they have just one nationality, we are not speaking about, well, perhaps now with the current debate, but we did not speak, at least with this first draft, we did not speak about retracting the nationality of all the French citizens. So we have any way to find some solution regarding to the French nationals who want to attack the state, and not just retracting nationality.
Yasser, do you agree with that analysis?
Yes, I do actually, and our speaker was on point. Is that we don't have any indication that this measure will be effective. These people already hate the society they are targeting, so threatening them with losing their citizenship, it just makes no sense. It won't scare them. But going back to this public opinion focus on behalf of Mr. Francois Hollande, he recently, according to radio station Europe 1, Francois Hollande himself refused to change the constitution after going through a referendum, because you have two ways to change the constitution. Either you have 3/5 of parliament agreeing with you, or you have a referendum asking you to do so. And Francois Hollande himself outruled and said, no way, I will seek a referendum because, and quote, I am traumatized by what happened in 2005 when a referendum rejected his proposal of a European constitution. So again, Mr. Francois Hollande is taking very dangerous measures to actually have two kinds of citizens in France, the mononationals and the binationals, so-called to have symbolic measures. Well, I'm sorry for the president, you don't wage a war against terrorism with symbolic measures. You bring your country united and you make sure that the rule of law prevails. And so far, since the state of emergency has been enacted in France, the rule of law so far has been put under mute.
Anne-Elisabeth, I want to put a quote of yours to you and ask you your thoughts on this, okay? You said, we know the police have indulged in abuses before, but we trust them not to go overboard. We have this very strange attitude towards the police where we know that they will do what needs to be done. Do police abuses in the aftermath of acts of so-called terrorism, do they concern you, particularly when it comes to Muslims and people of color?
I don't think it comes specifically against Muslims or people of color, but any abuse of the police concerns me, and I think it also concerns the government. I think in the immediate aftermath, there were searches in houses that were much too brutal and should not have happened that way. And it doesn't matter what the suspicions they had, they did abuse this. I think they have now been told by the Ministry of the Interior and by Bernard Cazeneuve that this is not something that's going on. And I think it's being reined back, and I hope that those people whose homes were trashed will sue so that the rule of law prevails. I mean, by and large, they're all right. I think immediately after the killings, they got too enthusiastic, and I think that should be sanctioned.
Yasser, I can tell you have a reaction to that.
Actually, as we speak, the Collective Against Islamophobia in France is dealing with 161 cases of abuses from the police. It's either brutal and humiliating raids on families and businesses and mosques, or putting under house arrest several people who to this day do not know what they're being accused of. And if we continue with the list, we are reaching so far 3,000 raids that have been carried since November 13th. For only 3 preliminary inquiries dealing with terrorism. So police brutality is still a major problem. And to show you how much, how despicable the government is treating the Muslim minority, let's quote one of the prefects, what we call the local governor in France, speaking to the Muslim minority here in Paris. He said, you have to be patient because we need to send a message to the French population. So this is an outrageous statement by the highest local authority, showing that first, Muslims may not be French citizens, and second, the Muslim minority may be the punching ball of the government to send tough guy statements. So far, the Muslims are being treated as the public enemy, not because they want to be victims, but because for 2.5 weeks before the COP21, Muslims have been the number one target of these raids. And it took several videos online that went viral for the Minister of Interior, Mr. Bernard Cazeneuve, to say, well, will we send letters to the local governors asking them to abide by the law? Well, if the local governor does not... Yeah.
Julien, is this something that politicians are taking seriously, that politicians are leading on in any way?
Well, they don't speak about it much. I think that what we have to take care about is the fact that we should remain united in the country, meaning the authority, the people, the elites, the believers and the non-believers, that we have to stay united. Regarding to the police raids, I think that we have to take care as well regarding to the fact that we don't know the intelligence pieces which provide the different measures. There was indeed a lot of raids and arrestations. It's brought by intelligence. Bernard Cazeneuve has called the prefects to stay Republican and to keep the general interest, including the Muslims, and the local authority is also protect the mosques, for instance, because we have seen that there was some attacks against Muslims. So what we have to take care, and it's the whole debate is actually about that, the fact that extremist forces, radical Islam or radical far right want to divide the society, and what is very important for the country is to stay united.
Ultimately, do you think this law will actually pass? And again, it hasn't officially been proposed yet, and it still needs to be discussed and worked out. But can you see a law like this actually being put into the Constitution in France? What do you think, Julien?
Well, the way to written this law in the Constitution, again, is about symbolic measure. It's what the people are looking for. But I think that if we have to do that, we have to be very cautious not to divide the society. One of the analysts treating the question said that it might not be a trouble for now on if we have such a measure written in the Constitution. But what about if we have an authoritarian regime coming on? And it's actually what the National Front said. They said that, well, first it was our measure, so now the president understood that it has to be taken, and we have to go further. So we see that we have to pay attention not to play the game of the far right in France as well.
Okay, Anne-Elisabeth, your closing thoughts. Do you think, can you see a day that this law will actually put into the Constitution?
It's if a bill is presented to Parliament by the Socialist government asking for this, I suspect it will pass. The Socialists still have a majority, and those of them who will not vote it will be counterbalanced by lots of people on the right who will vote it.
All right, and Yasser, your thoughts as well. Can you see a day that this will become the law of the land in France?
Actually, the civil society that I'm part of is highly active and is directly speaking to members of parliament to ask them not to to vote for this law. So we can't really predict the future, but we are starting to see a shift in public opinion at the grassroots level. Now it all depends on the mobilization of everyday citizens, of course, human rights organizations to form a single front, and I see that happening, and we'll be speaking about that in upcoming days, hopefully.
Thanks to all of my guests, Julien Theron, political scientist and analyst at the University of Versailles, Anne-Elisabeth Moutet, political commentator and journalist, and Yasser Louati, spokesperson for Collective Against Islamophobia in France. And thank you all for watching. As always, you can leave your comments on the program's page of our website, aljazeera.com. You can also post your views on facebook.com/AJ Inside Story and tweet us at AJ Inside Story. Find me, Richelle, Carey, and all the team here. Thanks for your time. Bye for now.